the Catholic Church. How would Chesterton defend the church today? Some of the things he said are quite timeless, because the church throughout history has had its missteps, it's had its scandals to deal with. And it seems to have always survived those scandals. In fact, Chesterton argues the church has survived its own death several times. It's always been a premature burial of the Catholic Church. And he says there's a reason why. It's because it has a God who knew his way out of the grave. But he says one of the sins of Christianity, or he actually says, the sins of Christianity are actually one of the doctrines of Christianity. That we are sinners and we fail. We need redemption. We need confession. And we need renewal. And he says actually that the church isn't justified when her children do not sin, it's justified when they do. That's the purpose of the church, is to take care of sinners and to get them back on track. And he says the world actually pays the supreme compliments to the Catholic Church when the world is absolutely intolerant of the church even having the appearance of evil in it, when those same evils are tolerated everywhere else. So the world actually holds the church up to a higher standard, and that's a compliment to the church. He says that the human race has always admired the Catholic virtues, however little it can practice them. And oddly enough, it has admired most of them that the modern world most sharply disputes. If no one should be left in the world except 1 million open malefactors and one hypocrite, that hypocrite would still remind everyone else of holiness. And it's true that the world hates the church. Sometimes it hides this hatred with political correctness. Chesterton seemed to predict this too. He said there are people who call their hatred of Christianity an all-embracing love of all religions. And he said these are also the days when a Christian is expected to praise every creed except his own. But ultimately, what the world cannot abide is when we talk about God as a reality, as a reason for changing your life and changing your behavior. Chesterton says when you do that, the modern world will try to stop you somehow if it can. So, as I said before, the prophet wants to be wrong. What the prophet's trying to do is get us to turn around and change our ways. But anytime you argue that people have to turn around and go back, the common response is, well, you can't go back. You can't go back. You can't put the clock back. Chesterton says, you know what? You can put the clock back. We've invented clocks, and you can set the clock to any time you want. So you can put the clock back. And civilization is also something that we've created. So we can create the civilization we want, if we want to. And so Chesterton says, if someone says, well, as you made your bed, then you have to lie on it. He says, no. If I made my bed badly, please God, I'll make it again. The Christian ideal, argues Chesterton, would create the best kind of society. It would create it would correct the ills that are suffered and create the most justice in the modern society. Because that's what it's done throughout history. Because it's been based on the family, which has its model in the Holy Family. So the solution means making laws that respect the family as the most important unit of society. It means making laws which respect religious principles. It means a wider distribution of property, Chesterton argues. More justice for all that way. It means not being afraid to teach the truth to our children. And it sometimes means turning around and going back and repenting to fix the things that we've done wrong. Chesterton argues that every revolution is only a reversion to something normal. A revolution is revolving, turning back, going back and starting over and getting it right. And when you walk out of the confessional, you have started over. That's what you've done. Chesterton says when you walk out of the confessional, you're 5 minutes old. You get to start your whole life over again. And yet, there still is the argument from the modern world that the old moral system is breaking down, that there's nothing we can do about it. People will say that even if they're morally opposed to things like abortion or homosexual marriage, there's really nothing we can do about it. Those things are here to stay. There's nothing we can do about it. We just should give up and accept it. Well, Chesterton has a response to that, because he points out that the key word that these people use in their arguments is inevitability. They say these things are inevitable. But he says it's not inevitability. The problem is impenitence. He says we're subconsciously dominated all departments by the notion that there's no turning back. And that's rooted in a materialism and a denial of free will. And this modern refusal to undo what has been done is not only an intellectual fault, it's a moral fault also. It's not merely our mental inability to understand the mistake we've made, it's also our spiritual refusal to refuse that we've made a mistake. It all comes back to Chesterton's most famous line from this book, What's Wrong with the World? The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting, it's been found difficult and left untried. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Can you comment at all about the Chesterton living in England back in the 1930s when the decision of Lambeth came out from the Episcopal Church? Did he have any response to that?
Yes, the question was when the Anglican Church approved birth control, contraception.
What? I didn't hear it.
The question was, did Chesterton make any comments when the Church of England first approved contraception back in the 1930s, called the Lambeth Conference? Chesterton was actually one of the first people to really speak out against birth control in a book form, because prior to the church actually making that statement, there were, of course, many folks in the secular world arguing for birth control, and it wasn't called contraception, that was called birth control, and Chesterton said he didn't like the idea, but he didn't like the term either because there was no birth and no control. But what people forget about the early arguments for birth control